All right, every Tuesday morning we sit down and chat with our good friend Tony D'Angelo. You can follow him on Twitter at TonyD'Angelo7. And always interesting stuff up on Twitter with Tony. Tony, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Lee Elci. Good morning, everybody. Proud to be among you.
How was your Memorial Day weekend, long weekend?
It was good. A lot to do around here. You know, you're never at a loss. It's unbelievable. But, and we're talking about studying, how hard studying gets. I have to study every year for my license. Typically, I do that on Memorial Day, and it gets harder every year. It's really something. And, I didn't have a computer, way back when, didn't have all these, neat little things where I could do research. I had to get everything out of a book, and why was that easier? I don't know.
Is it the lack of? I mean, what is it that makes it harder? I find it sometimes the same thing for me too. Like things that usually were a breeze, now I have trouble like maybe staying on point because maybe there's so many other things that are going on. I don't know. What.
Yeah, I like to think it's too many things in my head, and I can't process it all.
That's probably it. That's probably it. All right, so listen, we're going to talk a little bit about Bonnie and Clyde today, right?
Yeah, a little bit more of Bonnie and Clyde and Semaphore, and, it's sort of the continuing story. I found your interview last week with Liz Karanowitz interesting. You had asked her, point blank, why there hasn't been a lot of attention or sufficient attention on Ned and his frauds. And I don't want to interpolate what she said. You could go back and listen to it if you're so interested. But basically the gist of it was this is all, rocket science, and politicians commit fraud, and there's a lot of other things going on. And, I sort of, got the impression of how relevant is this when, we've got this and high gas prices and all that kind of thing. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, and it's like, well, it's not like we threw a pop quiz at you guys, last night. This is something that's been around for a couple of years, and it's not like you had to do a lot of homework because we have done this for you. But, you can base your own, judgment on that. But what I would like to do, and a term was being tossed around. I don't say this, with any sort of anger or any sort of direction, but just as an objective term. Credible. What is credible? What is credible to the, for any sort of information we may receive? And I wanted to go back and I want to give a month's recap, if I can, with respect to our old pal Semaphore. And, again, I want us to focus on today what is credible, what should we be believing, because we're going to go through this and we're going to find out there is a lot that we hear that is spoken about that is not. On May 3rd, I had raised the point on this show of $2.1 million being paid to Semaphore on Saturday, April 30th, 2022, and we were all to understand that Semaphore was completely out of COVID testing. So what is this money going for? And I had taken the stub from the state checkbook, and I had given it to the Department of Health. I'd gone down the numbers, the invoice ID, the PO number, and the contract number, and I said, give me all the paperwork with respect to what is here. And, I've always, two things as far as get to the thing of what is credible. I've always maintained two things. I've never wanted to come before this fine audience and talking about, the Swallows in Vienna or, some hypothetical tinfoil hat thing. I've always wanted to have a document or some proof for what I'm doing. And I've also maintained that, what we do here every Tuesday is kind of like I liken it or I analogize it to a dirty book that we keep in Grandpa's shed. Everybody runs out there to look, but nobody admits that they look at it. But yet they want to come back and say this is something that they themselves found. But So while I'm researching this, on May 11th, in the Connecticut Mirror, there is an article, an investigative article by Dave Altamori, where Dave Altamori makes a conclusion based upon what I was thinking, but it kind of goes a little bit beyond where I was because I couldn't get to that point yet. The headline is CT COVID testing company got paid after breaking contract with state. And Mr. Altamori goes on. He lists all the payments, including the $2.1 million payment that I just referenced. He went to the DPH, and, of course, they're closed mouth. They're not saying anything. The AG's office said we have nothing to do with this supposed master contract. So he's making a reasonable point. You know, money's coming in, but yet this is supposed to be over. Now, when I went back to research this column on Friday the 13th, Lee Elci, it is completely wiped off the map. It is you cannot find this article. There is a huge retraction by an Elizabeth Hamilton. 2 days later, we are sorry, we were wrong, forgive us, there's terrible mistakes here. And basically they come to the conclusion that all of this money, including the $2.1 million, was for, or they come to the conclusion, they make the written statement that this is for testing that was completed in January, and shame on us, we don't mean to mislead you, and all kinds of things like that. Again, what is credible? You know, state-run media, Dan Haar starts saying, oh, look, bunch of conspiracy theorists. Now, the political establishment started to look at Mr. Altamori's column and say, well, now we've got some serious questions. Now, needless to say, we did this 2 weeks prior on our show. Again, we don't deal in credibility. We deal in little green men under the bed. But I went back to my check stub and I said, hey, wait a minute. This is a different contract number that the $2.1 million came in. That that Mr. Altamori referenced. So, neither representation in the Mirror, neither representation from the Department of Health is truthful. So what do? I pick, I pry, I make myself an insufferable pain in the you-know-what. And the very, very long story for radio, made very, very short, is we stumble upon something. And you can call this gimme, no bid contract COVID number 2 for Semaphore for something known as whole genome sequencing. This ain't COVID testing, okay? This is a mapping of a person's genomic content, and it is based upon something which is known as a statement of work, which is kind of like a subcontract based upon a contract. And for $250 a pop, I've got the contract. I got it here in my left hand. For $250 a pop, they are running whole genome mapping and testing, which they say is predominantly, but not limited to, schools and elderly facilities. And they send me a couple of invoices that do not pertain to the $2.1 million, interestingly enough, but they're doing it in Danbury, they're doing it in East Haddam, they're doing it in Middlesex, they're doing it at Central Connecticut State. But what's very interesting in this statement of work is that the genomic histories, or if you will, the testing, is going not only to the state, but something called, this is right in the contract, I'm going to call it GISAID, GISAID. It is a world-based genomics repository based in Munich, Germany. So I mentioned this to Kathy last night, and I said, we talked about it, and she looked at me and said, well, my data could be over there because I was COVID tested twice when I went to, medical procedures. It's and a whole bunch of others. Now, let's move down this one step further because, again, what is credible? The DPH, number one, lied to us, misled the Connecticut Mirror, and wanted to mislead it all. And it's kind of self-incriminating. Because this is the thing. I've been chasing slime balls for 35 years, and eventually a slime ball trips himself up. They make a statement, I guess, where they wanted the Connecticut Mirror to do a retraction, and they put a paragraph in of whole genome sequencing. The statement of work for whole genome sequencing, this is the Department of Health to the Connecticut Mirror, is effective September 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. DPH has not requested whole genome sequencing from Semaphore since the company indicated that it would be ending its COVID testing progress. We're back to the same old thing of feeding oats to a dead horse. $2.1 million, but the testing is ended. You don't have enough samples, but yet somehow payment is being done. Now, the other thing is I see nothing. I see absolutely nothing whatsoever about informed consent. Not a thing. Every parent should right now be FOIing the living hell out of the DPH. I mean, is this class actionable? Listen, I'll leave that to those experts. Don't come to me for free advice. But, I mean, it's like, and this is the whole thing. So God knows what, God knows where this data is. God knows what it's being used for. And, you could go even farther than that as to what are these models being used for. And I mean, any rights here for the individual to know where their medical data is? Now, I'll just say one more thing. Semaphore, in their investor presentation material, they brag about the fact that they've got a multi-million-dollar data repository of genomic histories, and kind of put in, most of these we have consent, meaning that, they've been tricking some people all along. Last thing I'll say. Knowing how this whole thing plays, if they're running whole genome sequencing out of COVID-positive tests, if I go back and I add up all the money since September, since this particular statement of work, and $3 million, and if I divide that by, again, no bid contract number 2, $250 a pop, I come to 12,000 shall I say, samples for whole genomic sequencing. If I divide that by the total number of people in the state, $3.5 million, my decimal point 0.0003. That would be reflective in that example of a positivity rate. And, it's like, and we know the positivity rates that Ned quotes, so it's like, again, what is credible? What do you want to believe? I mean, I'm having trouble here with, quote unquote, the established media, or certainly our, whatever you want to call it, our state bureaucracy in charge of this. So I'm back to, there's this $2.1 million. It's ostensibly for whole genomic sequencing, but I don't see, I don't have an invoice. They won't give it to me. I don't have a purchase order. They won't give it to me. What kind of games is everybody playing? It is sickening. Sorry for the long rant.
So where can somebody, where could I, because I had to get tested a couple of different times, like I'm sure every single person who's listening to me right now and us had to get tested at one point or another. So where would they go, Tony, to find out whether or not they have, had
my first stop would be the Department of Public Health and say, I was tested on this day by this person. I would start with the actual testing facility and then the Department of Health and say, give me everything. Yeah. Give me every place where you've given this. Give me every place where this has gone. And, I mean, that would be my first thing. And then when something pops up from something else, you do the same thing with them. I mean, it is a miserable slog. But basically, I mean, we as citizens, like you asked, where did this go? Start there. But, it's, it is beyond hazy. Let me just say this. There's there's a lot of whatever you want to call it, scholarly articles that you read. It's not really my area, where it's like, well, we have major ethical concerns, or like, for example, what if I hated Lee Elci and I had his genomic profile? Right. Think about that. Yeah. And what you could do with that, and if there was something, or Tony D'Angelo, or anybody, or my neighbor, it's like, and they just do this stuff and they don't care. I would start with the Department of Health, but honestly, truthfully, I think, parents, people, if you're not, if you don't see something terribly wrong here, political parties, forget about it. But it's like, I can't help you. It's like this to me is like entirely beyond the pale.
I'm thinking as I'm sitting here saying, of all the things that we've discussed, if they stole your genomic blueprint and have it and they have it without your consent, this is like the worst of the worst. This is as low as you can go, and everybody should be furious if that's the case. I mean, we talk about money and all that.
And I mean, how could I put it? I don't, and this did cross my mind. I am trying to keep it out, to be very honest, but if you go back and you look at, listen, I'm going to come right out and say it, Nazi Germany. One of Hitler's, and I'm not saying people have these Hitlerish things, but you think about what could be done. In his primitive way, he tried to make a master person, which of course you can't do. Only God can create, and it's like, but let me just ratchet that down. So it's like, if the system has my genomic data, and let's just say, God forbid I'm ill and I'm asking for a particular treatment and I can't get it, is somebody looking at that and making the determination and not telling me, well, D'Angelo is a, 3 to the left, 2 to the right, born in Stamford, Connecticut, has got this thing, we're not going to waste our resources on him. I mean, that is a pure possibility. And that's the thing that, it's, there's like, if you want something from me, you can ask me, but yet when you're doing it, I mean, any person going in to be COVID testing is like, do I have COVID-19? He does not know that his information is going to end up in a data bank, with the state and in Munich, Germany. For what? It's like,
yeah.
Listen, I mean, and again, Lee Elci comes back to what is credible, what is to be believed. I mean, we really are, if you want to get spiritual about it, we're living the book of Timothy. We know what the truth is, but it's every day it's being turned into fables. So
is this I hate to say this to you, this is more than a theory then. This is actually, you feel like you have concrete proof of this.
I have a contract. I have a contract for whole genome sequencing. And the whole genome sequencing contract, or more properly, a statement of work, a subcontract, is references that this data goes into a database in Munich, Germany.
Right.
And if you read about whole genome sequencing, it's the study of all the various things, because they want to have, or at least the official thing is, they want to have predictive medicine. And, they want to be able to look at somebody and say, well, because you're this, we can do that.
Right.
Now, of course, there's an inside out to this. Because you're this, we're not going to bother doing that, and you may want them to do that. Which starts to mess into the whole, DNA of, who we are as people.
Yeah, but there's a group of people who would probably sign off on that, right? Because there are a group of people who are okay with their information being shared on any platform. So, but they should ask you when they, or at least, not at least, they should make sure that they have your permission before they take your genome sequence.
Well, that's just it. And then you think what has gone on in the state for 2 years. They stole our personal identities in the Boston Consulting contract. No one ever admitted it. They're now doing this, and yet, what are they doing and for what? And what does this have to do with really a very bad virus? How does that translate into these other things? What are you trying to accomplish here? And then you think, okay, Boston Consulting, McKinsey, this is just not some, little hinky-dinky health department acting on their own. They just don't have the, they're if there's no agenda here, you're going to have to tell me that there isn't, because so many things, point to the fact that there is. And I've got a contract. I've got a contract from the state of Connecticut, or more properly, a statement of work. Those pages are going to go up on Twitter later. We're going to be asking some very serious questions. Parents, don't let your kids be abused by a, rotten state bureaucracy for whatever purpose, at their profit and your burden.
And not one other outlet has picked this up. That's what you're saying.
None whatsoever. And, it's like, to the political parties, to the Republicans, to keep believing whatever they put in these newspapers. I mean, it's like, where Mr. Altamori, I believe, is on the right track. Hey, there's money here and something happening. But again, there's two. You got to have a sick little practice mind like I do. There's two different numbers here with these contracts, and then they come back and say, "Oh, none of this happened."
So, just so everyone's clear, Tony was the first to break SEMA 4 before anybody else. It flew under the radar until we tried, to wave that huge SEMA flag, which finally, eventually, people caught up to. And he's ahead of the curve again, saying, if you got tested, there's a good chance that somewhere in Germany there sits in some data bank your genome sequence. So there you go. And we'll follow this, and maybe in 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 months, Tony, somebody else will write something else about it. Who knows? Maybe if we're lucky.
Yeah, and we'll put it this way: it'll be we're getting. I'm still on them as far as what this $2.1 million paid for, and what particular data of whom was used in this. And oh boy, I mean, you talk about molasses in January. They don't want to tell you, and they never want to tell you what they're actually doing. Welcome to our government, like you said this morning. It's all about it's all about what they want to do, and they really don't care a tail about you.
This is the first time, though, I'm more concerned with my personal liberties being robbed than the money. I want to know how they can steal essentially your identity.
And if you're running against Ned Lamont and you're not mentioning this, as far as I'm concerned, I'm wondering if you really care about the welfare of children. I mean, because it's like, what are they doing? They got these young people. It's like, we're going to build this model going forward until they're 50 and 60, and somebody's got it. And you don't take something like that if you don't have some motive. It is not for your benefit.
Tony, great stuff today. Again, as normal, as usual, fantastic. Thank you very much for all the research that you do.
My honor, my pleasure. And hey, you can check it out for yourself. And I got a pile of papers. I'm happy to, share. I'll put the contract up there. That'll be enough to go on for many.
All right, make sure you follow Tony D'Angelo 7 up on Twitter. Do it today. All right, Tony. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, pal.
All right, pal. We'll talk to you later. There he is, Tony D. We'll come right back. Bruce Flax. Stick around.
Pretty looking people, but I can tell you people, they were the